Right, well, you might be able to hear the church organ going inside this. Well, it's a minster actually. I'm in Wimborne in Dorset. Obviously Wimborne's an incredibly important place, one of the sort of key places of ancient Wessex. And the building is astonishing. I'll just turn the camera around because I can't turn myself around. You can't really see very much, probably. But the roots of Wimborne go back, I don't know. I'll have to check these dates, but probably to the 8th century. And I was just sort of, exploring Dorset. Obviously I've been here about a year now, and beautiful place actually, very different from Kent or Sussex. I must say I didn't like Sussex very much. I don't know what it is about it, even though most of my ancestral line comes from Sussex, so you would have thought that would have had a particular attraction to me. Here is a little bit of a better view of the Minster. Extraordinary building. But it just goes to show that over that period of time, how we've changed a lot in our way of thinking. In many ways, and in other ways we haven't. There's obviously a thing about community, and you can see that if I just, we've got this beautiful sort of square that's outside of the Minster with lots of very old buildings. They're now coffee shops and stuff, but they were obviously inns and places for people to live and to trade and all the rest of it. Going back to, well, it would have been here right the way from the beginning, obviously, because any church would be the centre of the community. But I've been sort of considering certain things for this next book about, music and being able to survive as a musician, and I've been taking lots of things that I've experienced through teaching and being a player, where you can there is an undercurrent of, for want of a better word, truth, even though obviously the world of music is changing so quick because of technology. There are certain undercurrents that remain the same, or art, let's say, remain the same. Whether you're a medieval artist, or whether you're or somebody scratching something on a wall in the Stone Age. But one of the things that sort of struck me recently is this idea of, people's opinions. They've become quite, because obviously people can post their opinions up on the internet, have become this sort of, people can say what they want, and it's out there in the public. But there's always this idea that, your opinion is valid. To you it is. I'm not convinced that those opinions are valid for other people. We need to obviously, I really believe we need to have as wide a range of opinions within society as possible, because, as they would have put, it's a broad church, and I think that's very healthy. The problem is that obviously your opinion becomes, your belief system, which is nowadays our own little religion. Particularly in the United Kingdom, we don't tend to subscribe so much to organised religion as maybe other places. But this idea that people will look at great artists or great people in history, and you get this sort of revisionist attitude concerning somebody's work and the fact that they weren't very nice people, and therefore their work isn't worth looking at anymore. And we've done this a lot, this sort of revisionist history, and it obviously will appeal to anybody from history. Like Churchill was a really good example of somebody sort of, certainly a man of his time, and he would obviously have had a lot of opinions that would have been shared by a lot of people, but they're not the opinions we like now. So we tend to sort of downgrade people, and I think as an artist you need to look at that and sort of go, well, we need to separate the art, if you like, from the artist. The things that somebody did from the person. And the reason why we need to do that is let's take it, from the world of art, of music. Some of those things that are really valuable to you personally, as a human being, the way that enriches your life, those works of art can come from people that are deeply unpleasant. And one of those people that I was thinking of is Caravaggio, who's, if you've ever seen any of Caravaggio's art, which you would have done even if you didn't know who he was, they are truly spectacular considering the period he was painting. But this man was a dangerous man, probably a murderer, somebody who couldn't control his temper. And he was a dangerous man to be around. And yet his works are just utterly sublime. And the church sort of turned a blind eye to this guy because he was so incredible. But we don't do that anymore. Now, we're in a period of time where if you're an artist and you don't realise the implications of what you say, then you're obviously making a rod for your own back. But I still think we need to consider, because of the creative aspect of who we are, about some of the works that people do are so valuable that somebody who you might totally disagree with, you shouldn't cancel them in modern parlance, right? Because you're not going to benefit from it. So there's a couple of examples. I was listening to a history podcast and they were talking about something that David Bowie had said back in the period of time, because it was sort of late 70s, early 80s. Well, actually it was the late 70s. Bowie had made some comments in this sort of period of time of the Thin White Duke that were deeply fascist. If that had happened now, that would have been the end of Bowie. Now, this guy, this period of time, his life was a nightmare. He was a young man, completely off his face on all sorts of drugs, And he obviously said a load of things that he would have probably regretted. But this is the problem now, that whatever you say, or whatever period of life you say it, will come back and haunt you. And I've mentioned this before with regard to, what would have happened if you'd lived several hundred years ago. You could have said something in the local tavern and your mates would have thought, well, you're a nutcase, but that's Kevin, that's what Kevin thinks. If you'd gone out into the marketplace and shouted it out, you could have been in deep trouble. But people didn't, or tended not to. But now, of course, whenever you post anything up, that's like going out into the marketplace and saying something that could really offend the authorities in such a way that you could end up being in trouble. So there's a few things here. First of all, what people did in the past, I think you just have to look at it and go, well, a lot of this is people, and they were people of their time, saying things that would have been said at the time. Nowadays, if you're an artist, you've got to really curate who you are. And that sounds incredibly false, but of course, everything is false. Personality is false. You're projecting something into the world that is just you in that moment. And you may change in the future. I know I have, from when I was younger. But if you're considering doing anything where you're going to be thrust into the limelight, right at the very beginning, you've just got to be very careful about not truly disclosing who you are, but disclosing the persona that you want to project. And if you think about the word persona, it's a mask. It's about masking yourself. That's sort of what it is, right? That's probably how the Greeks would have thought about it. And it's certainly how people in the East think about things, that a lot of these things are not permanent. Or whatever you project in the world is not real. It's just the mask you wear. And, we need to sort of think carefully about that. But we also, at the same token, mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater when we reject people from the past, and we view them through the lens of where we are now. So going back to this thing about the church here and this Minster, this would have seen so many different changes of ways of thinking over its existence of 1,300 years. And some of them would be almost 180 degrees opposite to where they started. Otherwise, these places wouldn't have existed. They wouldn't still be here. If this hadn't changed its way of thinking in the Reformation period, it would have fallen foul of the authorities. So things change dramatically, and we need to understand that we need to be flexible in our thinking. So there have been a lot of aspects to recent developments and people that have fallen foul of their artwork has become, whether that's a book or who they are as people and how people value their work, have fallen foul of this. I was thinking of Neil Gaiman, whose book The Sandman is incredibly clever, incredibly deep and searching. But obviously his lifestyle and the way he is. And to be honest, you know, he's just an ordinary bloke. Has caused people to fall out of love of his work. Same with J.K. Rowling. And most of these things are so complex. We only get that top layer of stuff. So with regard to Rowling, there's a really good podcast called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. And that's worth checking out. I think it's about 6 episodes. I can't remember the guy who did it. But it goes as sort of an in-depth thing about J.K. Rowling's sort of stance that's often just pictured as being transphobic. But when you listen to this, it's actually much more complicated than that. And often there is a simplification. But you'll need to listen to that and just make up your own minds. But you know, somebody who's created a character and a series of books that have been transformative to people, particularly the type of people who would be, you know, transgender, interestingly. So at that point, I shall, I'm going to go and have a trip around the Minster, because I think it's just opening. So that'll be while I'm here. So with that, I'll leave you to ponder.